It turned out that most finance teams didn't really end up using this style of kind of machine learning or AI forecasting because it doesn't really give you anything actionable. It might tell you, hey, revenue is going to be some certain number next quarter or next month, or sales might be this, but it doesn't actually tell you, okay, what do you need to do in the business in order to get that.
Hello, and welcome to Tech for Finance, where we help finance professionals leverage technology to level up their lives. I'm your host, Adam Shulton, and in this episode, we're going to be chatting with Taimur Abdaal, CEO and co-founder of Causal, a modeling platform that helps you automate everything from financial models to headcount planning. Taimur has a degree in mathematics and statistics from Oxford, and after a short period working as a data scientist, he co-founded Causal in 2019, which has now raised $25 million from investors like Excel, Co2, Passion Capital, Naval, Ravikant, and others. In his spare time, Taimur enjoys playing the piano, playing badminton, and exploring the London food scene. If you like what you hear today, please make sure you do subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform or on YouTube. But thanks for joining me today, Taimur. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks so much.
Not a problem. So we'll kick things off, and I'll ask you the question that everybody's probably asked you already. So data science, modeling, do you just want to very quickly talk us through what that transition looked like and how you've ended up where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it kind of started when I was a teenager. I was pretty into computers and kind of just discovering the internet in general. Started off more on the design side of things, so messing around in Photoshop and making graphics and graphic design and logos and things like that. And then eventually, learning some basic coding like web stuff like HTML and JavaScript and that side of things. And I think from a pretty young age, I always wanted to run my own business, start my own company. And so I was always sort of trying to think of ideas and building projects and apps and websites. And so when I was at university, continued doing that stuff. That's where I met Lucas, my co-founder. We worked on lots of side projects, and we'd always planned on starting a company together. We didn't have any sort of particular ideas we were really interested in by the time we graduated, and so we both ended up working for a year or two. As you mentioned, I was a data scientist at a couple of different startups. And that was really my first exposure to the kinds of stuff that companies do in spreadsheets. And so I was working at this company, Nested. It was a startup in London. There were about 80 people at the time. They had a finance team, and obviously, like most finance teams, they were doing a lot of stuff in Excel and in Google Sheets, and they had a lot of the sort of typical challenges that people have with spreadsheets, right? The spreadsheets are amazing in that they're so flexible; you can do pretty much anything in them. But there's a lot of tricky pieces, from getting data in from different systems to the actual formulas and errors and syntax and that kind of stuff, to then kind of presenting stuff with people, communicating, sharing. And so, from seeing some of those problems that the finance team at Nested had with their spreadsheet financial models, that's kind of what got me and Lucas, my co-founder, thinking about, hey, what would a better modeling tool look like? Why hasn't someone, tried to build a better modeling tool than a spreadsheet? Spreadsheets been around a long time. And so that's what we're really trying to do with Causal, trying to build a very general tool for modeling, calculations, data visualization, things like that. A bit like a spreadsheet in that sense. But we're not interested in a lot of the other things you might use a spreadsheet for example, managing some business process or tracking your grocery lists and all the other kind of stuff you might do.
Very good. Thanks for that. And what do you think the threshold is then? So, and I wholeheartedly agree, finance especially, we love spreadsheets, right? It's the go-to. Somebody asks you something, right? Well, I need to do my calculations. I'll open a spreadsheet, right? And we're getting to the point now where, and again, it's not in the same league as what you guys can do, but spreadsheet add-ons. I think there's even a forecast button in Excel now. So the other day. So I guess if we were looking at this in terms of levels, entry level is, I guess a basic model that doesn't really have many variables in it, right? You maybe build on a spreadsheet. Then maybe next level is, I've got a plugin that's going to enable me to do X, Y, and Z. What, in terms of your thinking, what do you think is that sort of crossover between sort of entry level and the point where they might have more of a dedicated tool, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to think about it. I think a couple of the sort of points at which we typically see people considering moving away from spreadsheets, or where I think it's worth considering, is firstly, if you need to build something that you need to reuse on a recurring basis. So, you might need to whip together a quick ad hoc model for, some business thing that you're trying to do. You might just need that model tomorrow, and then you're not going to look at it again. If you're pretty adept in Excel, Google Sheets, you're fine to do that in Google Sheets, or Excel. It'll take you a couple of hours. It'll be done. You'll move on. If, however, you need to build something that you're going to be coming back to on a regular basis, maybe every month you want to update some numbers from your data source, or maybe once a quarter you want to run scenarios, or maybe you want to share outputs every single week as the numbers are updating. I think that's when the fact that spreadsheets are so manual, it really starts to add up. And that sort of 1 or 2 days a month of pulling data from different places, really starts to become a time sink. And that's where it's worth considering, okay, are there tools that can automate some of this manual stuff so that on a recurring basis, I'm not having to spend a bunch of time maintaining this spreadsheet? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess there's two ways of looking at it, isn't there? So apologies, 2 kids keeping you up all night, your voice and all
good.
Sometimes. So sorry about that. There's 2 ways of looking at it. So obviously the point that you've addressed is the time saving piece, right? I don't really want to have to build from scratch every time I'm, working through a new scenario. We'll have to
right.
But I guess there's the other side, and it's kind of links to some of the stuff that you've been posting about recently when we talk about data storytelling, right? Because I think we're now moving to the point where decisions need to be made quicker. And I don't know whether you're seeing this as well, but some of the previous conversations we've had, some of the advantages of having stuff that's a little bit more live actually is quite useful. So instead of going away and thinking, right, well, let's have a thing, let's, build a few more spreadsheets or go through a few models that could take us days or weeks. Decisions in the room. So I was wondering whether you could speak a little bit more around what you consider to be, I guess, good data storytelling. And the second part of that is, for me, and I don't know whether I'm speaking for others, I really struggle, not so much with the story piece and the presentation piece, but on what's the focus? Because it's sometimes difficult. And of course, you've got background in mathematics and statistics and this sort of stuff. How do you find the data that tells the story? How do you prioritize what is good data versus bad data? Speak around that a bit.
Yeah, I think, data storytelling is kind of super interesting. And I guess it's not really positioned that way, but it's a lot of what finance teams are doing. It's telling stories with the different data from around the business, whether that's financial data or more operational data. I think I think probably the most important thing that we see when working with sort of our customers and even internally when kind of trying to make decisions using our own data is just having really deep sort of domain expertise in whatever it is that you're looking at. So, if you're on the finance team of a company, just really understanding the company in a lot of detail, like exactly how it works, what the different teams are doing, how data is being collected into different systems. Is it being manually filled in somewhere and then dumped into something? Is this coming from like the CRM? I think the thing that's indispensable when working with data and then having to present it or tell stories off the back of it is actually understanding that data really deeply. I think once you have that understanding, you then kind of know, oh, okay, this is, that tool or that system might be a good place to start going to see, okay, what do we have in there? What does that data look like? Or you might know that, oh, actually, that stuff is not very reliable right now. We had some issue with that, with the CRM last month, so I can't actually go there for that data. And so I think, I think domain knowledge, very, very, hard to overstate just how important it is to sort of understand exactly how the business works, understand how that data was collected before you even get to the point of then starting to explore it.
And I think as well, it's also knowing what questions to ask, right? Because as much as finance, they get kind of the honorary position of being responsible for all company data,
Right, yeah.
So, other people do have, different responsibilities, and it's not purely down to finance to manage the data, right? So asking good questions, and I'm seeing a bit of a trend with this at the moment because, again, we can speak about it a bit later if you like, but we say AI is the hot topic right now, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And people are getting a bit panicky and a bit overwhelmed. I personally was very overwhelmed earlier on this, trying to to make sense of everything. As
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
people were, just because of the pace of it, right? But people are now thinking, right, well, what skills do I build? You know, if there's not a lot of point in me developing those low level hard skills anymore, where am I my time? So we're seeing more of a shift to, you know, business partnering, whereby, you know, finance are kind of breaking out of finance. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they go and work somewhere else or work for a different department. It just means that they become better partners. I guess tying to your point there about finding the data, making sure that you've got that domain expertise, the way that you're going to get that is by asking questions from your peers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some businesses do it well, some people don't. But if you're not doing it, then my recommendation is that you just go out your way to ask good questions. You know, whether you'd agree with that or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, any time you are sort of visualizing data, or anytime you're working with data, you're kind of looking at it through the lens of whatever questions you're asking. And so getting those questions right is really important. And I think that's where finance can actually add a lot of value, where I think the other team, sales teams, marketing teams, the other teams that finance works with, they're often, pretty stuck in the weeds. They're kind of very deep into what they're doing. They might not have context around what's going on in the rest of the business. And so finance has that kind of full picture of all the different teams of the business, and they can take a bit more of a step back than probably the people who are doing those jobs day to day. And by asking those right questions, they can kind of guide each team to kind of making decisions based on all of that extra context.
And then I guess expanding that a little bit. So, you know, we've got data, you know, whether it be from an HR system, a CRM system, and finance. So we can combine that all together, right? You know, whether it's in very well presented spreadsheets or a dedicated tool. You know, we then need to start thinking about, right, well, if we are doing modeling and we are doing that forecasting and looking at that future vision, how are we going to go about that? So there's a couple of things. And you might tell me off because you've probably got more experience in this than I do. But there's a couple of things that I've been playing around with personally, because I try and provide insight where I can at sort of the lower level to begin with, you know, people sort of finding their feet. So Google Sheets plugins, you know, there's a load available. The guys at TensorFlow did a plugin called Simple ML for Sheets. Okay.
Right.
And basically it's dead simple. You know, you've got your date range in one column, and then you've got your values against those date ranges. But the dates continue, and then you click a button and say, predict what the dates are going to be. Simple. And you've got some basic machine learning algorithms in there. There's maybe a couple. And then you can, you know, apply seasonality if it works. Doesn't always work. Apply seasonality. So that's one example. And then another one, and we'll get into this conversation in a second because it's something else that I really want to ask you about, is the likes of Notable, which is essentially a kind of a user-friendly Jupyter notebook that will help you, you know, build visualizations from your data. Connected to ChatGPT right now. So, you know, here's data, and again, it'd be in a spreadsheet that you upload and say, look, you know, can you give me some visualizations? But you can also tell it to build in those additional machine learning parameters to say, just bothered about analyzing the data as it is. Can you give me at least a basic representation of what that looks like over time? Now, for you, sorry, it's a long way about it, isn't it? Is assuming we've got good data, be it from finance or different departments, what's the next level? So is it just a case of being able to say, right, well, I'm going to overlay machine learning algorithms? How important is seasonality? You know, are there any other external factors, whether it's, I mean, we've had examples of weather data previously, that sort of stuff. So what are you seeing there? What are you seeing in terms of variables and the things that make forecasts better?
I think the sort of machine learning and AI approaches to forecasting are pretty interesting, because I think so far, until now, until sort of LLMs and the current generation of, I guess we're calling it AI now, whereas previously we called it machine learning because it was sort of at a different level. I think the previous sort of generation of machine learning models that people used, they were kind of regression models where you have this kind of structured data set. The machine learning algorithm figures out some patterns. It can maybe incorporate other pieces of things that you include in that data set, like seasonality and so on, and then it spits out a number. I think it turned out that most finance teams didn't really end up using this style of kind of machine learning or AI forecasting, because it doesn't really tell you it doesn't really give you anything actionable. It might tell you, hey, revenue is going to be sort of some certain number next quarter or next month, or sales might be this. But it doesn't actually tell you, okay, what do you need to do in the business in order to get there? It wouldn't be able to tell you, hey, revenue is going to be this much because you need to go and hire like 3 more salespeople and you need to spend, X amount on marketing across these channels. I think those, the old generation of machine learning algorithms, they were very sort of narrow in terms of the data that they can look at and interpret. I think, so basically, we don't really see many finance teams using them for forecasting. Forecasts are kind of much more, you call it manual, but kind of built by the finance team based on understanding of how the business operates. And so to get to some revenue, that happens because something changes in the business, whether it's hiring, whether it's sales and marketing spend, et cetera. I think we haven't really seen, it's very early to see what will come out of LLMs. But I think the new generation of AI models does actually have the sort of opportunity to be able to go have context on the much wider business, where you can kind of feed in, maybe like a whole 20-tab spreadsheet that includes like hiring plans, it includes like models for each team, et cetera. And so it could actually, in theory, be able to tell you, hey, if you hire these people and if you do X, Y, and Z, then revenue will be this amount. And like, that's one strategy, or it might come up with another strategy. And so I think we haven't really seen what that looks like yet. I think probably in the next couple of years, we'll start to see, this kind of stuff built into spreadsheets, tools like Causal and other planning tools. And so I think I'm pretty bullish on AI now being applied to forecasting and modeling, where the previous generation of algorithms just kind of wasn't the right fit for it.
Yeah. And the trick is in the way that you train the model, though, right? So again, as a refresher for people that haven't been part of conversations before, LLM is a large language model. It's what ChatGPT is built on, right? Vast amount of data. But when you interact with ChatGPT on a basic level, OpenAI have trained that large language model to interact well with you through a chat interface. Yeah, that's the way it works. What we're now seeing is the evolution of finance tools that are training the models better, so that you ask them a question, it's more likely to come back with a finance-related response than it is just a generic response. So we've had this whole sort of proliferation of advanced prompts and prompt recommendations and all of that sort of going around the internet, solely down to the fact that if you ask a rubbish prompt to ChatGPT out of the box, it's going to give any number of variables out of it.
Yeah,
I think there are already companies that are creating like FinChat, and all of these sorts of, narrower applications of that large language model. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be very interesting from a forecasting perspective where they get to, because it's not just about, how do we train the large language model so it is good at creating forecasting recommendations. It's also how do we train it so it's good at the forecasting, but then also good at understanding the data that it's built on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work. It's exciting. Of course, it's exciting. But tricky. I don't envy your job.
Yeah, we're definitely, we've started thinking about how we might be able to embed some LLM magic into Causal and kind of at what layer of the product we want to try and insert that. And I think there's a lot of kind of low hanging fruit of just making very manual stuff very easy. So things like writing SQL queries, or, if you have some big model, just being able to ask a question like, what was, revenue in this month, for this product, filtered by whatever, that might otherwise require like a bunch of different clicks, or it might require knowing SQL and things like that. So I think the low hanging fruits will kind of become a commodity, where I think in a few years' time, you'll kind of expect in most products that you won't have to do manual things like write SQL queries, and you won't have to do a ton of configuration to make a chart. You can just describe the chart and it'll create it based on the data. I think this more kind of ambitious, reasoning and forecasting based on like actual reasoning and actual logic. I haven't seen what that'll look like yet, but it's definitely something we're thinking about.
Yeah, because it kind of ties to the external data piece, doesn't it? Because there are some modeling tools in it, and again, I'm not a Causal pro, so I don't know whether you guys are doing it yet.
Sure.
Has the ability to add a variable that says, what if there was a flood in 6 months' time?
Right. Yeah.
recession or, another pandemic or something like that. It's data that sits outside just core data. It's that as I say, contextual data there. And I think it is going to be a while. And again, I'm happy to be proven wrong, because if technology has said anything in the past 6 months, it's been proving a lot of people wrong, right? But I had a very interesting chat with a guy called Chris Riley a few podcasts ago, and he does a lot around advising in terms of financial modeling and consulting. Right. And we had a similar conversation, and I posed to him, right, well, what does a human-based activity look like versus a machine-based activity? The words were essentially, he doesn't think that machines are going to replace human gut feel and that experience anytime soon. Because in theory, like when you look at stock markets and financial and all of that sort of stuff, then there's a theory to say, you can build an algorithm that's going to predict trends and all of that sort of stuff. Again, not an expert in that. I suppose in theory, there's an argument that says that a model could be trained on any number of, weather variables or any external. But I think in the short term, it's still going to require a human to say, right, well, we've done the best that we absolutely can with the technology and the AI. We now need to make the decision of what we actually think is going to happen, right?
Yeah. I think ultimately, the thing that is missing with AI is just any kind of accountability, right? If you're the finance team, it won't be good enough to say, well, we did that because the AI says, right? Like ultimately, you are accountable, and so. I think that's going to be the challenge, and AI always has to be the tool there, but a human is ultimately the person who is making the final call, making the decision, and is accountable for whatever happens after that.
I have been using AI to run some scenarios though. And it's the prompt's too long, and share it with you the other day, but it's kind of, decision fatigue is a real thing, right? Everybody's got too many decisions to make. Right. At the end of the day, when you're absolutely exhausted and you think, am I really going to have to decide on something else? You can use AI as a sounding board. You can use people as well, right? But there's an argument that says that AI might be more objective, even though maybe there's a bias there. We don't need to get into that discussion. But I just ran through. I said, look, here's the current staff. Here's their skill set. Here's their responsibilities. We're thinking about doing this. We're thinking about hiring people with these skills. These are the people that are leaving. These are the challenges that we got. And it was like an A4 page prompt. And I looked at this and I thought, I'm going to get garbage out the back.
There's no way it's going to understand this.
It did, because it's obviously GPT-4, right? The most intelligent that we've got so far, right? And it actually came back with some pretty credible scenarios. Because I said to it, give me 5 scenarios. Yes. So it wasn't just a blanket, what would you do in this situation? That's not going to be useful, right? But I said, based on the information above, give me 5 different scenarios for how you would look to hire and solve these challenges. And it gave 5, and we ended up going with one of them. It was kind of the decision that we'd already made. You see what I mean? So that human element was still there. But it was good to have that validation to say, look, you've got 5 different scenarios here based on logic rather than emotion, because that's what it's doing, right? It's working on emotion. So to have a logic-based sounding board as opposed to, because as you'll have some people in your business that are endlessly enthusiastic and positive. Oh yeah, you should do that. Don't worry about it. Again, it'll all be fine. Right. And you've got the polar opposite, which are the people saying, don't do that. It's too high risk. We're not interested in that. Whereas an AI is going to try and be balanced where it can.
That's awesome. That's that's super cool. It's cool that that's actually useful in that way. I think what it's been useful for me for is just kind of, like you said, you kind of already had a sense of, hey, we're thinking of going with this decision. I think before making decisions, the thing that always runs through my mind is like, okay, this seems pretty good, but are we missing anything? Have we just like missed something really big and we're about to like go in this one direction? And so if you can just ask the AI, like, hey, this is the situation, like what are like the 10 things we need to be aware of? If you look at that list and you're like, yeah, we've actually thought about all of those already, then you at least have some peace of mind of like, okay, we're not missing anything major, like let's go forward with this more confidently. Whereas otherwise, I think that's always my worry, particularly with decisions that are hard to reverse. So like, okay, have we considered like the whole space of options here?
No, that's it. I mean, you run a successful business, so your level of stress and pressure when it comes to those decisions must be a lot bigger than mine. But I totally understand what you're saying. I do totally appreciate that. But cool. Right. Well, this kind of leads me on to the next point. You've touched on the large language models replacing SQL queries, right? And I think it was something that you posted about recently, right? And we've just been through that. But if I've understood you correctly from what you've just said, we're essentially saying that we're cutting out that manual piece, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's
out with it instead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's move on a little bit to something that's not necessarily directly financial related, but kind of piqued my interest. So I've got to talk about your Twitter. Right?
Okay.
You've got like, what is it, coming up to 22,000 followers or something like that?
Yeah, I don't really keep count, but yeah, something like that.
I don't keep it. Which is good. Is that just in the time that you've been running Causal? Is that since uni?
Yeah, I mean, I've had Twitter since like secondary school. I remember, I think I first signed up for Twitter back when the cool thing about Twitter was that like a bunch of celebrities were on there, and like you could like talk to these celebrities or something. And so I had this TV show I really liked called Modern Family. And I was like, oh, cool. I can like follow the Modern Family actors on Twitter. Amazing. And so, I got it when I was like 16 or 17. I didn't really tweet anything. I didn't use it much. I think I properly started using it probably maybe like 5 years ago now, maybe like a year before we started the company. I think just started off with just kind of tech related stuff. And then I think the kind of tech Twitter community has just kind of built up over the last sort of 5-6 years quite a lot. It's just it's just a great place to hang out if you work in tech. I will say that I think it used to be a lot more fun. I don't know if it's like algorithm changes since Elon took over or whatever, but I do remember Twitter being like a lot more funny, a lot more entertaining. Whereas now there's just like a bunch of people arguing on my feed all the time. And I think it feels like it's going downhill a little bit, but I'm still a big fan of Twitter.
It's great, and everybody that's listening needs to follow Taimur on Twitter. It's really good stuff. You got really good balance between the entertaining stuff and the more I won't say boring, but the more the more sort of business type stuff, I guess.
Sure.
And that's why I saw that. So the question was, what's the probability that LLM interfaces will replace SQL queries in the next 2 years? And then you got like a 30% run response on less than 25% or something like that over 92 votes. So I think it's the way it's going. But we'll have to see, right? Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see in the next couple of years.
Also on your Twitter, is that a Mazda 6 you've got with a personalized number plate on it?
Yeah, someone sent me that picture. It's not my own car. That would be pretty good. So someone sent me that picture. I was like, okay, that's pretty funny. I'll set that as the number plate says Causal.
Yeah.
So I thought that would be a good cover photo.
The hashtag life goals. I was expecting it McLaren or something like that. So when I saw the badge, I was a bit taken aback. But
yeah, one day.
The one that I'm looking at was this is what the perfect and in inverted commas man looks like according to AI. And I'll put the link in the show notes for people that want to check it out. But that is hilarious.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I feel like it didn't do as well as I was expecting. I thought, someone was actually in London a couple of weeks ago. I think he's doing like a world tour at the moment. So he was doing some talk at UCL. And so I went to see him in person, which was quite interesting. And I think a few people, there were some posts around like, you see all these kind of crappy articles from weird publications about AI is predicting this, and there was a similar thing around like, this is what the perfect man looks like with AI. And so I thought it might be funny to do a parody of that.
Yeah, spoiler, it's probably not what the perfect. I mean, he's okay, but
yeah, no offense to Sam.
Yeah. So no, it's all good. So no, cool. So the last bit I wanted to talk about, I guess, is it ties back to that decision making piece, and then I'll ask you the last question that I always ask on these podcasts about your favorite sort of tech. But I went on to your personal blog, and again, I don't know how long ago it is that you've written on there. Have you stopped writing on there now? Because I think
I think since starting the company, I just haven't really been making the time to write regularly. But for maybe a year or two, I was doing it like once a week or every couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, no, it's good because there's like a graveyard of the top of it says the books that I bought in 2019 that didn't read.
Yeah. I think a lot of people post like lists of like, oh, this is what I did read. Actually, I find that I buy a lot of books and then don't end up reading most of them.
So on there you've got Atomic. Did you actually end up reading Atomic Habits?
I think I've skimmed Atomic Habits. Yeah.
Because everybody says like if there's going to be one sort of like productivity book they were going to recommend.
It's really good. Yeah, I think it's helped a lot of people.
I'm guilty. I've not read it myself, but I've got the summaries from many people.
Nice. Yeah. That's what you need.
So and this does relate to our conversation because when we talk about modeling, we talk about forecasting, that sort of stuff. It does relate to decisions. And I apologize if I'm absolutely pulling this to pieces. You can interject, but the name of the blog post is called "Measure: A Mental Model for Decision Making." Headline: should you spend £30 on a pair of jeans or £100? Should you get anti-reflective coating on your glasses? And I think a bit further down there was the example of when you were buying a bin.
Right. Yeah.
A trash can with your mum. And instinctively you say, right, well, I don't want to spend much on a bin.
It's a bin. Yes. Yeah.
Look at that logically, it says, right, well, actually, it's in the middle of the room. It's got to last years. Otherwise, I'm just going to end up replacing bins, and it's got to look half decent because people are going to see it all the time, right?
Yeah.
So, could you just walk us through? Because I was thinking a really interesting point on magnitude versus measure, the kind of the inspiration behind that, and is that the sort of thing that's kind of informed your decision making now that you're the CEO of a company? I thought it'd be something that a little bit different and interesting to pick your brains on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thanks a lot for digging through the archives of my. That's something rare. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I think just to kind of explain the concepts. I think when we're making decisions, there's kind of two things that we need to keep in mind. The first is like how valuable is like the thing that I'm getting if you're buying something, for example, and then the second thing is, how frequently am I actually going to be getting that value from it? So on one extreme, you've got something like, going out for like a really fancy, Michelin star meal, right? It's going to be very expensive, but it's going to last, a couple of hours max. You're going to get some value for maybe a couple of hours, and you might spend, £100 on that or £200 a day. On the other end of the spectrum, you'll have things where you almost don't even notice the value that you're getting from them, but you're using them really, really frequently. So something like this might be, the quality of your mattress or your pillow or, your toothbrush and, things like that you're using really, really frequently. And I think typically when we make decisions, it's very easy to think about and kind of simulate the magnitude of the value that you're getting. You can think, oh, that's going to be an amazing meal. It's going to taste so good. You can, kind of feel it. But that's only kind of one of these components that we need to be thinking about. And so the point of the blog post is basically to say, hey, I think we sort of systematically underestimate this other component, which is the kind of frequency at which you get value from things. And actually, if we were really thinking about this, logically, rationally, however you want to put it, I think we'd be investing a lot more in sort of the boring things that give us a small amount of value very frequently over a long period of time. And so, most people, if they were going out to, let's say like a sort of a really special occasion, maybe it's like an anniversary or a birthday meal or something, you might spend like £100, maybe more on this meal. And you think, oh yeah, this is a special occasion. Like this is great. This is worth it. It's a great meal. But I think a lot of people, if, they were thinking about spending £100 on a kitchen bin or, something kind of boring like that, it would seem like a lot of money, like £100 for a toaster. Really? You can get toasters for 20 quid, whatever. Right. But actually like, if you have toast every morning, you're going to be using that toast every single day. It's probably going to last 5 or 10 years. If it's a nice experience, if it makes the toast better, it's probably a lot better to spend £100 on that toaster than it is to spend £100 on that sort of anniversary meal. And so, the post was just talking about, what are these things that we might be undervaluing? And I think, boring kitchen objects like bins and toasters is one of them. I think investing in ourselves is another one. So things like, it might seem like a lot of money to spend like £100 a month on, getting a fancy gym subscription or something, or maybe like £200 a month on a personal trainer, right? Feels like a lot of money. to spend on those things. But if you think about how important your health is, you're not just getting the value of that personal trainer in that half an hour session or 1 hour session once a week. You're getting the value in the rest of your life where you're actually healthier, your body feels better, works better. And so I think there's lots of things like that where we're probably underestimating, these sort of less interesting, but more frequent, more kind of long-term bits of value. And then to your second question, I think within the context of running a company, I think when we're developing the product, this is definitely something that we think about around like, hey, is this part of the product? Is this feature something that's really high measure? Like, is it something users going to be using, all the time when they're using the product? Or is it, tucked away somewhere where, it's still like an important thing, but they're not going to be interacting with it on a daily basis? And just making sure that we really get the details right on those very high measure things. So, things like the initial onboarding flow of the product, right? You might have like 50, 100 people signing up for the product every day. Every single day, that onboarding flow is being used by all of these different people. And maybe only like one person gets to the very end where you have some like more advanced feature. And so, I think we definitely try and invest a lot in the high measure parts of the product just to make sure those are a really good experience.
It's a really interesting point, actually. So what can we invest in that essentially has the greatest impact over
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we can, right, I'm going to add to my set of questions. I think we're still within time.
Yeah, sure.
That's all right.
Absolutely.
So, because I want to move on to talking about ROI, because I speak with a lot of people that know that they need to change, but they really struggle to generate a business case, right? So maybe we can move on to that in a second. But it's got me thinking because, and people are saying, the Great Resignation is over and all that sort of stuff. I get that, but there's still a huge turnover of people just in general, right? It is still very tricky retaining good people, right? So if we're thinking in terms of high measure tasks, I mean, you talking about software onboarding made me immediately thinking about employee onboarding.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the quality of your employee onboarding directly related to whether they make it past probation, whether they are, staying with you for however many years, is their personal development plan something that you're investing enough time in for people to feel like they're part of the culture? And, again, every company's different, but when everybody's so busy and pulled from pillar to post, sometimes people will skimp on the HR bits because it's just more admin. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a way that we can flip that to think of that more logically? But I suppose you could then also apply that principle to, systems and process. It comes back to 80-20, I guess. What's the part of our process that generates the most results? Not just in the short term, but over time. How do we double down on that?
Right. Yeah.
I think again, it just comes back to better questions people can ask themselves about, what are we investing in, and how does that reflect in our time? But a lot of people also see this investment decisions as kind of financially based, so we've got big capex investment. We need to build it into the forecast. How's that going to, reflect? But I think people often forget about the time element because they are so immersed in their day to day. So again, another question for you before we talk about ROI is, obviously time is a commodity. How do you approach that in terms of your time-based decisions and what to prioritize over other stuff?
I'd say we're actually at the stage of the company where most of the vast majority of the investments that we're making are time investments rather than sort of dollar investments. Obviously, when you're hiring people, you kind of think about, okay, how much will we be paying this person over the course of a year? What value do we think they'd be bringing in? There is a bit of that, but I think the vast majority of the decisions we make are like, hey, should we spend time on X or Y? And we have limited people, limited resources, and we have to try and make sure we do that really well. I don't know if we have any sort of specific frameworks or kind of tricks that we use. I mean, I think we just try and make sure that, hey, whatever we're doing right now should be kind of the highest impact thing we could be doing. And if I think we're reasonably relaxed about sort of cutting projects that we now feel like, okay, this doesn't really make sense, or there's actually something better we could be working on. Whereas I think it can be a bit of a trap to get sort of stuck in, 2 months ago we said we'd like to do this thing, or like oh yeah, I said I'd like meet with this person because we were working on that thing, but actually now we're not working on it. Yeah, I think just like constantly evaluating and reassessing, hey, what do I think is the highest impact thing I could be doing, across all the teams, across all the people in the company. That's just something we try and do. And I think on a personal level, I try and sort of, I think there's definitely better weeks and worse weeks for this, but kind of at the start of the week, look at my calendar and see like, okay, like what's the most useful thing I can do this week for the company, and are all the meetings in my calendar actually aligned towards that thing, or am I doing like a bunch of stuff that isn't that, and actually I can postpone it or actually just cancel it, things like that.
It's, and again, I'm guilty of not doing that.
Yeah.
Turn up on a Monday morning, immediately get swept into the to-do list, and
it's so easy to
absolutely. Nobody's perfect, so we can't beat ourselves up too much, I guess. Right?
Yeah, sure.
But I guess that's when it comes into, and this relates to what we can talk about with ROI, because I posted about it a few weeks ago, because it only takes a small step to free up a bit of time that then enables you to free up more time, and it's the whole principle of compound interest, right? You need to invest a little bit and continue doing that to then reap the bigger rewards in the end. So when I speak with people, I with a laser focus, I say, look, what's the goal and what's stopping you from doing that? Where's most of the time that's not useful happening, right? And you only need to start with freeing up an hour or two a week.
Yeah.
And repurpose that time with a view of then freeing up another hour or two. Do you see what I mean? And that's what some people sometimes miss when they're building a business case or deciding whether or not to invest in tools, because the immediate thought is, I can't take on another system.
Right.
I'm overloaded as it is, right? I can't think about another process. But first, what process can you eliminate? And you alluded to it there. Are there any projects that we just need to scrap completely?
Yeah.
So what projects do we need to scrap to free up time for the things that are then going to allow us to free up more time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the way that you look at it? And for people that are looking to maybe look at the ROI from modeling tools and similar, is it time saved? Or, I mean, I grew up in the ERP background, so there's cost reduction percentages, there's all sorts of things in terms of saving number of because not having to employ more people. How do you tend to think about that? Not just from Causal's perspective, but also from your own internals. How do we justify the return from something?
Yeah, I think time saving is often kind of the most tangible thing, where you can basically put like a number on it, and depending on how you value your time, you can put like a dollar value on, hey, this thing is worth this much to us in time savings. I think the thing that often misses, related to what you're saying, is that the extra time, or like in the context of something like Causal, or like a modeling or a forecasting tool, we have a bunch of features that might save teams like a couple of days every month from not having to manually pull data from different systems, etc., and making it quicker to run scenarios and answer questions. So there's a very tangible time savings. I think that the thing that gets missed from trying to be super quantitative about the ROI is that you can, if it's say 10 times faster to answer some financial question or to run some scenario, it can actually sort of qualitatively change the way you work with the rest of the business. If people know that, oh, okay, the finance team is going to say like 3 days to get anything back to me if I ask them something, they will only go to the finance team when they have at least 3 days before they need to make a decision, and when it's something that they perceive as like, hey, this is like really big. We need to like plan ahead and go to the finance team like a week in advance or something. Whereas if people know, oh, cool, I can actually go to the finance team with random stuff whenever, and they can give answers, basically in real time for most things. And if it's something deeper, then they'll go away and dig deeper. It'll actually kind of change the way that they work with the finance team, or change that relationship completely. And I think it's hard to put a dollar value on that. But I think intuitively it's like, okay, that seems like a much better place to be in the business, where different business partners, different stakeholders can come to us and we can provide real-time answers most of the time. And then for bigger things, we have to go away and spend a few days and do some analysis.
It doesn't, to come back to your point there, it doesn't give you much time for the relationship piece if all you're doing when you sit in a meeting is analyzing historical data that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think there's a big argument to be said that, as we spoke about earlier, get people in a room and get everybody involved in those decisions.
Right.
Going to improve the the way that the business works in general, right? But as you say, it's difficult to quantify that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What I've seen in our business and with some of the companies that I work with as well is related to that side of things. It's kind of staff satisfaction that's built into that as well. So
Right.
when you look at younger generation of employees, right? It's the expectation nowadays, especially working remotely.
Yeah.
And I'm not, doing a disservice to anybody who spent their life, building financial models in Excel, because Excel still exists, and there's a business case for that. But I think there's a younger generation of people saying, right, well, I don't want to build a spreadsheet. I just want to get on with the fun stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And so from an employee satisfaction point of view, that retention piece might go up as well. You don't know. You can't say it will.
Yeah, exactly.
And as I say, from my experience, with the systems that we use now, we onboard new people, and the feedback is we love the system.
Yeah,
it just works so well.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that is harder to quantify, but it's still there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's always these sort of second and third order effects that can be kind of much greater than the really obvious ROI analysis that you might do.
It's the same with forecasting, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, you've got the second and third order effect.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting. And, we had another John Coley built a tool called What If I, which is another modeling platform.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I think I've actually checked that out.
Yeah. So he's got a background in visual effects, and he started it because he wanted to get better with his own personal finance.
Yeah, budgeting. Yeah, that kind of thing.
All evolved from there, but his view is, you can get rid of a single forecast or a single budget or whatever, and then work based on multiple scenarios, right? And I think this is where we're moving to. So, but no, good. Right. So the question that I always ask, and again, we've had a selection of answers to this, but the podcast is called Tech for Finance, right?
Yeah.
I'm a self-professed productivity / app nerd, whatever you want to call me. So I'm forever downloading apps on my phone. I'm forever trialing like bits of software on wherever I can find it.
Yeah.
So if you could pick a tool, it doesn't have to be a soft tool. It could be like a gadget. You just can't say your smartphone because that's a
yeah.
Is there like a gadget, piece of software, or a tool that is irreplaceable that you couldn't live without?
I think for me, probably the biggest one is aside from obvious things like smartphone, AirPods, stuff like that. I think that the thing I'm most happy with that I haven't sort of changed for the last probably 6-7 years now is the razor that I use for shaving. It's called the Philips One Blade, and basically, it's just like an electric razor. It's quite nice on the skin, but you can also adjust the closeness of the shave. And so it has this attachment where if you just want to trim rather than kind of completely get rid of everything, you can set the length and do that. And then if you want to kind of do the edges or whatever, I don't really have a beard or anything. I mostly just get rid of all of it. But yeah, it's just such a great experience. I started using it in 2016 or 15 or something. Still using it. Yeah, I love it. So aside from obvious stuff like my phone and my AirPods, my Kindle, I think this is, I was using it yesterday. I was thinking, man, I actually haven't changed this product for so long. Usually I get newer versions of things or upgrade things or try different things. I haven't changed it in so long, and I don't think I will.
That's an amazing answer. I'll let you into a guilty secret.
Oh yeah.
I have not shaved myself for at least 4 months.
Really? Wow. It looks pretty tidy for not having shaved.
So my beard doesn't grow quickly. Barber just does it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For 2 weeks, and that's it. And by
that's amazing.
It's a bit unruly. I'm just back at the barbers again.
Yeah.
I do as well, but I've not had to use it in a while. But yeah, no, and it's a fantastic answer. I did say gadget, so no, that is a valid answer. It's fine. What are you reading on your Kindle at the moment?
Or reading? I always have a bunch of different books, and depending on my mood, a mixture of businessy type things. There's a sales book called Just Effing Demo It or something. It's about sales demos. And then some more philosophy type stuff. A book called After Virtue, that I'm working through at the moment on ethics, something to that effect. So there's always a mixture, and depending on my mood when I'm going to sleep, whether I want something like really cerebral where I have to like think about every paragraph or whether I want something easier. I'll kind of decide based on that.
Wow. Okay. I did philosophy at A level.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah. I didn't get good marks. I loved Nietzsche, and I loved a lot of the studies that we did. But I just completely rubbished my dissertation. Like,
yeah, I think like exams and getting marks is kind of a different ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did it on Plato's Republic.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It wasn't particularly something I was particularly fired up by, and
sure.
Yeah, very good marks. But no, I'm still into it. I mean, it's all good. So no, that's been fabulous, Tim. I really appreciate your time. So before we leave, I mean, where can people find out more about you? I'll put your link to your Twitter and your blog in the show notes. Is
awesome.
there anywhere else?
Yeah, I think Twitter's the main one. And then obviously, if any folks here use spreadsheets, want to do any financial modeling or planning, do check out Causal, causal.app. You can actually type in casual.app, easy misspelling, but it still redirects to the right place. So you can, maybe the easiest thing is to go on casual.app. So you don't have to worry about the spelling.
That's amazing. And there's a free version of it, right?
Yeah. Anyone can just sign up and start using it. And then if you want to use more advanced stuff like data integrations, then you have to pay a bit of money.
You get like 5 models and the free one, I think?
Yeah. There's a couple of limitations around that.
Yeah, perfect. And you're on LinkedIn too, right?
Yep, LinkedIn, absolutely. Yeah, definitely drop me a connection request if you're interested in staying in touch.
Yeah, perfect. All right, Taimur. Well, absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on.
Cool. Thanks so much, Adam. All the best. Bye.